this moment, with the escalation in the East and with the discussion in Brussels, do you see and how you assess the steps the European Union is doing and their position at the moment on solving the crisis?
I think the most important discussions are going to be the ones that are in Washington at the moment with the International Monetary Fund, because I think it's the financial issues that are critical. I mean, the decisions on economic reform in Kiev, and then support coming from the IMF, which is the critical one, then the support from the European Union will come on top of that, but dependent upon the IMF and dependent upon the reforms. Then there is sustained pressure on Moscow on the conflict in Donbass. And I think that Moscow is beginning to feel the pain, the economic pain and the political pain. I mean, let's be realistic. I think the occupation of Crimea was probably very popular among most Russians. I think the war in Donbass is not popular among most Russians. And that will have its impact.
And if we speak about some instruments to put the pressure or solve the situation, what to your understanding would be the clear, effective mechanism?
I think the most important is to strengthen Ukraine in different ways. The strategy or tactic or whatever you want to phrase it as of the Kremlin is to destabilize Ukraine so as to be able to influence Ukraine. Accordingly, our strategy must be to stabilize Ukraine so as to be able to give the ability to Ukraine to determine its own future. And that entails the economic reforms, the financial stabilization, the democratic consolidation, all of those things that will make it much, much, much more difficult for the Kremlin to destabilize.
At this particular point, the reforms is kind of a buzzword, or everybody says it.
Yeah.
So what do you mean by that? When we speak about the reforms, what will be the clear evidence? What would be this understanding that they are there?
Well, I mean, the brutal fact is, of course, that there's a lot of things that needs to be done, and that it will take its time until you see the full effects of them. It is one of the sort of most misgoverned places of the entire Soviet space, at least the European part of that, during the last 25 years. And accordingly, the anti-corruption, to make certain that you have a state structure that works, getting rid of a lot of sort of bad subsidies that are there in the economy. This is going to take a couple of years for these reforms to translate into a truly new Ukraine.
Mr. Klimkin, the Ukrainian foreign minister, just has said that keeping the current pressure which is there is just not enough. There should be something else. If we speak about Russia, would you share that, and what is your idea about the future EU policy?
Well, if we talk about measures against Russia, keeping the present measures in place will have cumulative greater and greater effect. When you implement these sorts of things, they have virtually no effect day 2 or day 3 or day 4. But day 100 and day 300 and day 500, then it's really when they start to bite. And of course what we see in Russia is the effect of falling oil prices. We see the effect also, which were coming anyhow, the absence of structural reforms in the Russian economy, so there would have been a slowdown anyhow. So I think staying the course is the name of the game when it comes to Russia, and then being even more active in supporting Ukraine.
This week there were some talks about not lifting the sanction, but some kind of softer policy by some of the EU members. Do you think it is serious, and what also not can be done, but according to your feeling, how strong is this, let's say, sentiment in some of the European countries, and how will it have any influence? Coming with also with all these leaks with the policy of Federica Mogherini.
Well, I think in view of or seeing what happened in Donbass, that particular sentiment disappeared almost entirely. And what came out of the meeting of the EU foreign ministers on Monday was a fairly strong position, saying they stay in place. But also saying, which I think is right, if the Kremlin were to truly go back and implement the Minsk agreement in full to the letter, then of course there might be a scaling back of the sanctions, but we don't see any signs of that at all.
And what would be the sign? Because everybody's talking about implementation. It's not a full implementation, and it's always a lot of kind of play around that. There was this so-called ceasefire by now. And by implementation of the Minsk Agreement, what exactly is meant?
Well, it means a number of things which we are not even in the vicinity of at the moment. It means that there should be full control of the border between Russia and Ukraine, and that should be internationally monitored. It should be full withdrawal of all Russian forces and whatever they have in Donbass. There should be the ability to conduct elections in accordance with Ukrainian laws or in the framework of Ukrainian laws for leadership in Donbass. Those are fairly critical components.
How united is the United States with the European Union at this moment regarding the Ukrainian-Russian?
I don't see any major difference. I mean, there's always a debate also, as you pointed out, inside the European Union and with the Americans on the details of the policy. I mean, that's fairly natural because it's an evolving situation. But on the fundamentals, I think there's a very strong unity.
Today many people said it's very important not to speak about the aspiration, but the real results. We understand that there is some long-term, can be some long-term perspective, but in a short run, what are these critical issues to be implemented?
Yeah, but I think it's important to speak about both things.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these reforms, if you cut back subsidies and things like that, that's sort of painful in an already painful situation. And I think it's important for the people of Ukraine to understand the long-term vision of what is the ambition to really achieve by these things that short-term can be somewhat painful. But of course, I mean, look at energy subsidies, which was 7% of GDP. We're spending even more on energy subsidies than Ukraine is forced to spend on defense today. And that's insane policy, completely insane policy. But to roll that back, it's somewhat difficult because a lot of structures are dependent on that particular money. But then you need to also explain the vision of a Ukraine that is truly independent and truly prosperous. It can truly attract the investment that is going to generate the jobs in the future.
Still a month ago or so, there were discussion about providing a non-lethal aid to Ukraine. Do you think it's still on the table?
Well, I think there is non-lethal aid being delivered to Ukraine.
And anything else on that? How?
I don't know. I mean, that's individual nations that are doing individual things. But I think there's an amount of that coming.
And also, all the discussion about the, let's say, NATO membership and all that, bearing in mind that Ukrainian parliament voted for, this not anymore neutral status.
Well, I mean, the reality is, and that has been a reality ever since the NATO summit in Bucharest in early 2008, that there is no appetite whatsoever within the NATO countries for enlarging NATO. That was the case in 2008, very clearly, and I don't think it has changed in any sort of way, so one should be realistic on that point.